coding or AI? If you've been asking this question lately, you're not alone. In this year, the tech world is literally buzzing around AI, and many aspiring builders and career switchers wonder if they should dive straight into the AI coding tools and AI stuff, or they should go back to understanding the fundamentals of coding first. So today I want to talk about how I've walked through both of the paths and I learned coding on my own, but I've built a coding bootcamp. I have also built my own AI tech startup. So if I had to start from scratch today, I would lean on first principles thinking and looking back to the fundamentals and also embracing AI as a powerful tool. Think of it this way, learning the code isn't just about memorizing the syntax, it's about understanding how computers work, how the internet works, how the web works on a fundamental level. What is a web server? How do apps talk to each other? How do APIs function as bridges between software systems? These are the building blocks of technology, and even in this year with AI everywhere, those basics, they matter. For example, Oracle's tech writers describe an API as literally an interface that lets applications communicate and share data. When I tutor students or when I build products, I always start with these core ideas: the front end versus the back end. The users see the front end, the invisible logic lives in the back end, the HTTP requests, the databases, the algorithms. And once you get these pieces, everything else becomes so much easier to learn. So look, at the end of the day, it all boils down to your final end goal, right? If your goal is to get a job as a developer, then computational thinking is non-negotiable. You need to learn to think like an engineer, break down problems into smaller parts, reason about logic, and debug effectively. No AI shortcut can teach you that automatically. In fact, educators have been hammering at this point. AI coding tools have revolutionized development, but they cannot replace the need for fundamental programming skills. In practice, this means that even if you use ChatGPT to spit out some code snippets, you still need to know if that code makes sense. Every line of code that you push into the repository is something that you need to understand before even pushing it, right? I've seen students blindly use AI generated code and introducing like really critical spaghetti code and bugs without realizing it. Without the fundamentals, you wouldn't even notice because you're just tabbing away and saving everything that AI gives you. Conversely, if your aim is entrepreneurship or building products like I did with my coding bootcamp or with my AI tech startup, understanding the technology at a deeper level actually helps you leverage those tools better. I didn't become a full-time software engineer, but I learned Vue.js, React.js, backend stacks like Express.js and Ruby on Rails. And what each piece does is something that helps me understand the technical literacy that allows me to also hire developers effectively and build businesses and around software, right? It's similar to what self-taught hacker Peter Level says, right? He taught himself just enough tech by Googling around how to connect database or how to make a button work, and then building actual projects and learning along the way, right? He avoided formal courses, preferring to just search in Google and learning by doing. And this hands-on approach is powerful because every bit of code you write drills in those fundamentals, right? Learning by immersion is like learning a language by moving to a country and just picking up the words that you need along the way. So yes, tools come and go. React today might be replaced by something else tomorrow, but problem solving and core concepts, they endure over time. The mental models that you build, like how the internet works, what loops and conditionals are, these kind of things, they're timeless. One way to see this is how frameworks change. Serverless and microservices are hot now, but decades-old concepts like HTTP request and data structures are still the foundation. In fact, a recent Sigma analysis notes that developers with solid fundamental skills, foundational skills, can pivot to new areas like AI or even cloud computing much more easily. Learning the first principles is like a reusable toolkit. Once you have it, you can assemble whatever you want that the future requires. And trust me, people notice when you know the basics, when you know your stuff. Even early on in my journey, I got hooked on understanding how the internet actually works. I remember explaining it to my friends that every time you click a button, your browser actually sends a HTTP request through a server that pulls data from a database and then returns a HTML page. That kind of core understanding gave me the confidence to try out new technologies. Now, your specific goal might tilt the balance here, because if you're looking for a developer job, you absolutely need to build those coding muscles. Companies still care about algorithm skills, writing clean code, understanding web fundamentals. AI will help you once you're inside a dev environment, but to even get there, you need to solve problems on your own first. Imagine a job interview, and if you can't explain how a simple web app works end-to-end, front-end, back-end, databases, cloud, whatsoever, AI will not substitute for that knowledge. That's why bootcamps like the one I started emphasize that learning pledge, right? We teach you the fundamentals, and if if you don't get a job, we will refund you. We made a pledge because we know strong fundamentals do lead to outcomes. And to date, we have celebrated over 100 success stories with graduates landing tech jobs in as little as 2 months into the program. And those are the people who committed to learning the core skills and seeing it through to the end. On the other hand, if your goal is more entrepreneurial in nature and you want to build with whatever tools that make sense without going in to understand the bells and whistles of software, you can afford to lean on AI early on, honestly, right? But even entrepreneurs need a tech foundation to see what's possible. Say you want to use AI chatbots or co-pilots to automate a business process, so you still need to know if that automation integrates with your front-end website or how to store the results. And in my own startup journey, I co-founded Jobyer, which is an AI-powered HR job search assistant startup. After I saw how painful job hunting was for some of my students, Jobyer uses AI to write resumes and screen jobs. But under the hood, it's still a software product with a database, user interface, and a backend logic. If I hadn't learned these core skills first, I wouldn't be able to architect the solution. Put simply, AI is a powerful amplifier, but it needs a strong human hand to guide it. If you go pure AI first without foundations, you might feel productive at first, but you will, trust me, you will hit some walls. The tools will change, right? You know, what I've seen is that some developers see layoffs or shifts, but the ones that are last to be laid off are those who learn to incorporate innovation and change into their workflow. In other words, don't stick your head in the sand. Stay curious about AI, but also never let go of the fundamentals. If all developers suddenly now became unemployed, which is very unlikely, it would mean that most industries will collapse too, not just tech. So instead of fear, the winning approach is to blend them. Learn the AI tools, but learn them on top of a solid coding base. So one big message that I've seen play out over the years is no new tools arrive every day, but the thinking process will always stay. Remember when jQuery was all the rage, or when Vue.js was hot, or when React was new? If you only learn the latest fad, you would be chasing tails. Instead, focus on the rock solid principles. Jason Fried and these two guys are bootstrapped tech founders that I really admire. They often emphasize doing more with less and shipping quickly. They'd say, pick something, even if it's vanilla tech, and solve the customer's problem. Peter Levels made a fortune using plain HTML, CSS, a bit of JavaScript, and PHP, skipping React, Node, etc. because he wasn't building a resume for resume's sake. He was building a product. And at the end of the day, end users don't care what you use to build the product. They just care if that button they click work, right? This teaches a first principles lesson. The coding stack is ultimately just lists and loops and inputs and outputs, but once you understand that, you can hop onto a new framework really easily and really quickly. This is why I always stress in my advice, learn the why, not just the how. If you learn AI, don't just learn how to use the latest model, learn why it works, what's under the hood, even at a high level, right? And if you learn how to code, don't just memorize syntax, you gotta learn the logic and learn how to implement it yourself. Think of it as building your own mental model. A good analogy I like to use is the squirrel mental model, which is you don't need to memorize every library method. You just need to know where to find stuff and to understand how it works fundamentally. Then when you get stuck, you can retrace back to those foundational steps. Learning should also be cross-disciplinary. Naval Ravikant often says to learn specific knowledge that's not easily taught, which could be coding or product instinct, and combine it with general wisdom. Charlie Munger's inversion principle applies too. Ask what not to do, and the answer usually is don't skip the fundamentals. No matter how slick the AI agent, if you don't know what it's doing, you cannot troubleshoot or innovate it when it hallucinates or when there's some problems that happen. So I would study the architecture of an AI, like how models are trained or what a neural network roughly is at a high level, but I wouldn't start by coding an AI from scratch as a first step. It's not that easy, right? I make sure I can build and deploy a simple web application first. The fundamentals are like a spine. They keep you standing as things around you move. Another point I like to make is if I were to start all over, I wouldn't just silo myself into tech. Stack up multiple skills. For example, learn how to write about tech concepts, even blog or tweet about what you learn, because teaching others is one of the best ways to solidify your understanding, and it gets you noticed by the community as well. So you can build a presence online. James Clear talks about building keystone habits for a tech career. One keystone habit is communication. As one commenter on Peter Level's story pointed out, the best programmers that he has worked with also understood business and marketing. They built things that people actually wanted instead of just blindly following the scope of the project, right? Coding or AI skills are just one part of the equation. So if you're learning Python, also learn how to explain your projects on LinkedIn or in interviews. If you're diving into AI, also learn basic statistics to understand data. So in actual practical terms, I would teach myself enough HTML, CSS, and JavaScript to make everything that lives on the web, while also starting a blog or a newsletter where I share what I've learned each week. This is exactly what I did when I was building my coding bootcamp, and later on my tech startup Jobyer. Writing the about page or guiding students forced me to clarify ideas like what was an API, why should you use GitHub, what is Git, right? Each blog or post or demo improved my own personal understanding and my network. Andrew Wilkinson and Naval Ravikant both emphasizes building in public and skill stacking. They didn't just code, they also sold their projects. And guess what? You can use AI today to help you with some of these tools. For instance, I use ChatGPT to draft version 1 of one of my new product launches with Sigma School, and then I still edited and guided it with human judgment after that. So the key here is to use AI to augment your skills while you bring the strategy and the context to bring it all together. The idea of stacking also means lifelong learning. The industry changes so fast that even though my bootcamp covered a set of curriculum, we also kept iterating. For example, adding courses on data analytics and AI agents and AI workflows. We adapt to our curriculum as AI tools became more important in the industry. And in your learning journey, that means that after you grasp one framework or tool, move to another, but do it one at a time. Be good at one before you hop, right? Always be aware of jumping from resource to resource because you will end up overwhelmed. Instead, pick one language, maybe Python if AI interests you, or JavaScript, you want to go deeper into software and web development, and stick with it until you can actually build a meaningful project and then iterate to the next skill. So you might wonder, is any of this still relevant when AI assistants can write code and do data analysis? The answer is a resounding obviously yes, right? The tools have changed, but the fundamentals make you future-proof. Consider Stack Overflow's 2025 developer survey. It found that a huge 84% of developers are using or planning to use AI in their workflow, half of them daily. This tells us that AI is it's here, right? It's omnipresent in tech jobs today. You cannot run away from it today. But it also means something else. Everyone else will be using similar AI tools. What would set you apart is still your own understanding of software. And if I can ask two people to debug an issue with Copilot, the one who truly understands logic will always give me the faster, better, safer, fundamentally sound fixes. Also note that the same survey says developer sentiment towards AI dipped slightly. Some pros feel cautious. Why? Because those with a solid base realize that AI is just a tool at the end of the day, right? 60 to 70% have a favorable view, but notably around 50% of people learning code felt very favorable. I interpret this as newbies may be in awe of what AI can do, but also unsure if they will be left behind. Meanwhile, seasoned developers know it's a plus, but not a replacement. This matches my take and my bootcamp take with using AI as an aid and not a crutch. In practice, it means I would use AI to automate repetitive tasks like generating boilerplate code or summarizing documents, but I would still manually design the system architecture, writing key algorithms, and test thoroughly. The survey confirms that this blend is common now. AI will speed you up, but you got to verify every single line of code that you push into your team and your code repository. A personal example that I have is when building the backend for job here, me and my team, we experimented the AI code suggestions. It helped me write some really good SQL queries and Node.js endpoints faster, but I still needed to conceptualize the whole pipeline, how the resume parser feeds data to a matching algorithm. That creative insight was mine and my developers. Likewise, as a coding bootcamp founder, I encourage students to use tools like GitHub Copilot to learn faster, but ultimately to retrace and to understand every single line of code that it suggests. This hybrid approach lines up exactly with what Stanford researchers hint, which is that AI may transform jobs, and some studies are cautious about job impacts, by the way, and humans who adapt by leveraging AI will thrive. It's the same message as one trying to say here, which is to stay adaptable, to stay curious always. So don't forget human creativity. Humans still innovate in ways that AI cannot easily replicate. For example, DHH, Daniel Heinemeier Hansen, famously told us that building great software is not just about coding, it's also art and craft, balancing user experience, design, and with vision, right? No AI sits in a room and has a flash of creative insight or a beautiful solution suddenly comes to me moment, right? They don't have that. Only people can do that. We need that edge to solve novel problems. I remember working on an encryption feature where I had to decide between speed and security, and which is a very nuanced trade-off in tech, and AI wouldn't have known the specific requirements of our product and what our client needed. So understanding of algorithms and problem context did. And yeah, so in 2025 and beyond, whether you start with coding or AI, the underlying reason you learn things is to solve problems better than before. If coding fundamentals let you write a fast website, maybe AI will let you analyze user data automatically. Both skills add to your toolkit. The key is your mindset. Approach everything from first principles. Ask why. Ask it 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times until you get the root reason, right? When it comes to learning a new API or an AI feature, think about how would this look if I build it with raw code. Even if you're using a higher level tool, this mental habit, what Naval calls building your own mental models, means that you are not fooled by hype and you can always relearn whatever comes next. So here's a step-by-step on how I'm going to start from scratch in this year, right? Here's a rough playbook I would follow. The first one would be to start with a real project, not just tutorials. I would identify a small but meaningful problem to solve, maybe a simple personal website or a micro business idea. This forces me to learn by doing. For example, if I might want to create a daily coding newsletter app, to build that, I would need to set up my own web server. I need to connect to a database and to design a front end. Yeah, so along the way, I would need to learn some HTML, JavaScript, CSS on the front end, plus maybe Express.js or Flask on the back end. If I get stuck, I would just Google the issue and read docs and not do an entire course just on an unrelated topic just to try and solve this problem. That's just in my opinion, that's just procrastination. So I would learn the fundamentals. As I built that project, I would pause to understand each piece. What is HTML really doing here? Why do we make CSS rules? How does JavaScript interact with the DOM on the back end? What does this SQL query actually fetch? Why do we need to use an ORM? In parallel, I'll get comfortable with Git version control, which is very important, and basic command line skills. I would treat code reviews from mentors or peers as gold because they sharpen understanding of good practices. So this mindset will echo the first principles approach by Charlie Munger, for example. If you know the atoms of your field, any structure that's made out of them will make sense. So every evening, I would jot down a key insight. Like, for example, today I learned how HTTP GET versus POST works, right? I discovered the power of recursive functions and when can we use them. I write those things down and understand these fundamentals deeply. I will also, after solidifying a project's basics, I will experiment with AI. For example, I could use ChatGPT to generate some test data or get suggestions for optimizing my code. If I'm comfortable with Python, I might try using an open source model to see how to integrate it with my app. The goal here is to learn how AI can fit into a workflow. For instance, if I could use OpenAI's Codex API or GitHub Copilot as an AI pair programmer within VS Code and observe what it does, right? But I would always verify its output. For instance, if Copilot suggests a piece of code, I would ask myself, do I know what this line of code does? So it's so important for us to effectively use AI, use it when we have strong foundations, which means you don't skip the foundations to just rely on whatever code AI gives you, just copy and pasting it. Right, I think that's about it in terms of what I want to share in this. Just remember this, it's never too late, and either path you choose today is valid if done thoughtfully. If I were to start completely all over again, I wouldn't be dogmatic about this. I would learn coding fundamentals and I would play with AI as soon as I could, because in 2025, they're the two sides of the same coin. The internet still needs people who can build things, and the world needs people who can harness AI safely and creatively. So by mastering the fundamentals, you can actually make AI your best friend and your master, right? So what will you do? If you've been teetering with between coding bootcamps and AI courses, just my 2 cents, plant your roots in the fundamentals, right? And then let AI tools help your branches grow. It works for me. I built a coding school and even pivoted it into AI startups. And 2025 is a good time as any to start, right? Dive in, get your hands dirty, and don't be afraid to build something imperfectly as well. Launch it, get some feedback, and iterate from there. Every finished project, no matter how small it is proof that you're on the right track. If this discussion resonated with you, hit the subscribe button maybe for more videos like this, and feel free to leave a comment below and reach out to me if you have any questions. You can also explore what I do. Check out my coding bootcamp, Sigma School. Check out my AI startup, Jobyear, which is helping us get real world results for job seekers all over the world. And ultimately, though, the best action is yours to take. Pick one step today, write a line of code, pick a model, or share what you've learned, right? Then repeat. Keep at it. Keep those first principles will always be there. They're always going to help you. Trust me on that. And good luck. Go build something great.